The A Free Spirit Life podcast is supported by the Live Freely Circle. Did you know more than 89% of women say they feel stressed and overwhelmed with the imbalance of their personal, family, work, and home life? The Live Freely Circle was created for women who long to feel more connected to their true calling and who want to break free of being in a constant state of stress. Becoming a member of the Live Freely Circle gives you unlimited access to an amazing online community, inspiring coaching videos, guided audio meditations, monthly soul care e-courses, and life-changing tools, all at the click of a simple app. But more importantly, the Circle teaches you how to create a life that is empowered, intentional, connected, peaceful, and joy-filled, while giving you the time for the things and people most important to you. Stop rushing through life so you can start living and loving it, so you can live freely. What do you really want out of your life? Discover that and more in the Live Freely Circle. Start your 7-day free trial today by visiting livefreelycircle.com. This is episode 27 of the A Free Spirit Life podcast. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I'm Shannon Kinney-Duh, creator of A Free Spirit Life and a holistic life and spiritual coach. I am really grateful that I had the opportunity to talk with my guest today. Her name is Bari Tessler Linden, and she is a financial therapist, mentor, coach, mom-preneur, and the founder of The Art of Money. She has guided thousands of people to new, empowered, and honest relationships with money through her nurturing, body-centered approach. Bari's methodology weaves together personal, couple, and creative entrepreneurial money teachings into one complete tapestry. Bari is the founder of The Art of Money, a global year-long money school which integrates money healing, money practices, and money maps. She also wrote the book, The Art of Money, a life-changing guide to financial happiness. I am so thrilled that I get to share this conversation with you today. We talk about mindfulness and money, and how we can start making healthier money decisions, ones that support the life we truly want to live. We also talk about the importance of money healing, that it starts on the inside, and how we can start feeling like we have enough. You know, we get stuck in that enough-ness. Do we have enough? Do we feel enough? Never having enough? We talk about that today. We also explore money shame and why we feel embarrassed to even talk about our money. And we talk about a topic I really love, this idea of being an under-earner. Sometimes we get in this cycle of over-giving and under-receiving, and the more that I coach women and talk to women who are in that kind of cycle of not feeling enough, we over-give, we over-commit, and we under-receive, we under-earn. And I can relate to that, and I know many of you listening can too. We talk about all of that in today's show. So enjoy this conversation. I can't wait to hear from you. Let us know how this topic is affecting your life, what you think about our show today. You can go to the A Free Spirit Life podcast and leave us a review. Subscribe to the show so you get more great interviews like this. And at the end of the show, we'll share how to get in touch with Bari. Make sure that you start following her because she truly is full of wisdom. Enjoy the show. Hi, Bari. Thanks so much for being here. It really is an honor to talk with you today.
Thanks so much for having me, Shannon. I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, good. Well, tell everyone just a little bit more about what you do, where you live, and what stage of family life you're in right now.
Okay, so I'm heading into my 50th birthday. I have a 10-year-old son that I had just shy of my 40th birthday. We live with my husband of almost 18 years. We're coming up on 18 in January. We live in Boulder, Colorado. And I've been doing my Art of Money work for almost 18 years now. And let's see, when I'll just go back a tiny bit. I went to graduate school to study somatic psychology, which is body-centered psychotherapy. And I spent my 20s doing that. I thought that I would be working with couples around intimacy and sexuality and women and around those same topics, and also grief and death and body and food. And those were the topics that I was very interested in. And then my student loan came due in my late 20s. And that was my first huge wake up, freak out call where I realized that I did not have a relationship to money. The topic and theme of money was completely left out of my graduate school. And wow, how is I going to work with couples, let alone start a private practice, and on and on and on, if we never talked about money? And I don't even understand what my relationship to money is on a practical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual level. And so I, took a little detour and started learning bookkeeping, and ran a bookkeeping business for other therapists and coaches and artists for a while, and learned so much about people. I always say at that time, between 28 and 32 years old, I learned more about people by doing their books and seeing their numbers. And I learned more about them by doing that than if we were in private psychotherapy together. So much about cash flow, where they spent, what was important to them, values, etc. So I basically at some point put it all together. I realized it was time to integrate my previous training as a therapist and all the deep work from that background with all of these new tools and systems and skill sets I was learning around money management and bookkeeping and the language of money. And I surprisingly fell in love with bookkeeping, and I put it all together and I created a methodology which I now call the art of money. And I used to teach it in tiny little groups of 10 people over and over and over and over. And it integrates money healing, money practices, and maps. And now, 18 years later, I've had probably 5 different business models over the years. They've all had their strengths and challenges, and I'm in my favorite one. We're about to hit our 7th year of a year-long teaching program that I do online. So this year we have over 500 students in our year-long Art of Money program. And it's my favorite teaching model and favorite business model. And wrote a book that came out 2 plus years ago, called The Art of Money as well. And that's a little bit, about where I'm at. That's the program is my main focus. There is a second book on the table, and I'm hemming and hawing, and maybe we, but that's a little bit, I like my hiking time, and I like my, being in nature time, and I like my family time, and, turning 50 there's a whole thing around perimenopause and health and all that good stuff. And at the same time, I get to do really wonderful work while being a mom to still a young little guy who's growing up, is growing up not too quick.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I have a 10-year-old too, and I'm just starting to see like the big feet, like he's just becoming a little bit older kid, So yeah, we got to slow it down as much as we can. Well, that is a lot. And I was going to ask you, when did you start seeing that this was really a need? But it's obvious over the years, it's like really unfolded. So it kind of, I'm sure, guided you to this. But it's how, in the beginning, when you were doing like those 10-person or small classes, was it a scary thing? Were people nervous to start talking about money back then? How did you kind of broach this with people?
So, the beginning impetus, the initial impetus for this was that I needed it desperately. I needed this kind of training. Financial literacy was left out of my own education. So was emotional literacy, and those are 2 of my favorite things to teach. So first it came from within. Oh, this is a big missing piece. And I really thought I was the only one. I'm the only one who did not receive this money education. And I'm the only one who has money shame. And pretty quickly I started looking around to people from all different backgrounds in my community, different economic and class backgrounds, different income levels now, and, from different lineage and ethnicities. And wow, we all had some strengths around money, but we all had challenges, and many of us had shame, again, no matter what background we came from. And I just was seeing that we had taken on so many other big topics in life some of which I named, and money still seemed to be this last frontier. And, 18 years ago, it was a bit different than now. So when I first started teaching the groups, my groups were 6 weeks at a time, tiny little groups with 10 people in my living room in an apple orchard. And I think at the very beginning, I went right into money history first. Let's talk about what you learned about money from your family of origin. And I went there and I realized the very first evening that we needed to slow down or back up. And even if it was a 6-week class, I couldn't start with that. So I just started testing it all out. And I had handouts and exercises, and we met live in a circle. And, I just was seeing what the community needed, what the methodology, I don't even know if I knew it was a methodology, at that time, this little mini course, which has become a methodology. I was just really testing it out. But, I realized pretty quickly, let's not get people talking about money history right off the bat. And I think that's when I backed up and realized I needed a tool, and the body check-in tool, which is my favorite tool and came from my somatic training, is first and foremost. I start there. I end there in the middle. I'm inviting people to do a body check-in in all the daily money interactions that we have, when you're going to go online and look at your numbers, when you're going to have a money conversation, when you're going to pay bills, on and on. We can talk about that more, but it's really just a tool to stop and pause and allow us to check in on a physical level, sensation level, emotional level, and what's going on with our breath,
Yes.
And I think I backed up and said, I don't remember the exact order of how it was all created, but that's kind of how I went. I would present something and then realize, ooh, we went too far, we went too deep too soon, back up. Or, oh, we're missing a whole piece on forgiveness. Wow, how did I forget that? Okay, add it in, And just, I taught those small groups of 10 people that grew to 20 people for many, many years, probably 7.
Wow, that's so good. And I love hearing that, because I know, before we started recording, you told me you're on the cover of Mindful magazine, and your book's so beautiful, and you've got another one coming out. And I know that I have a lot of entrepreneurs or heart-centered business owners listening or people who are in corporate America right now, just unhappy with their life, but have these dreams that they want to pursue and have this inner calling. And so I love hearing the backstory too of what got you to this point. It took a lot of experimenting, and it sounds like a lot of trial and error and courage. And would you say that you ever felt like you were giving up, or did you just know that you're just going to keep trying? Does that come from within? Are you a naturally resilient person to begin with?
Well, what I've learned over the years is a few things. One is that I was born into a family of entrepreneurs, even though I didn't quite realize that growing up. My family was in real estate. Then they owned gay bars in Chicago with my uncles, my uncle and his life partner. And I just didn't get that they were entrepreneurs. I don't know why. So I got to, because I never got direct teachings around money, even though I, lived it and saw a lot and saw the up and down and saw the passion of it, but also saw the stress of it, So it took me until 32 years old to realize that I am an entrepreneur, that I really can't work for someone else, that I suck at working for other people, and that I really needed to be my own boss. So it took me until 32, because, I was working in the mental health field and in hospice and doing overnight care for people that were dying or had health issues. And I never stepped foot in the corporate world. And it took me until 32 to realize that I needed to start my own thing. I had no idea what that looked like. I had no idea how long it would take. At the beginning, I can remember in that apple orchard in California, we spent about 7 years there. I would be, a puddle of, crying on the floor, or, because it was hard. It was challenging. It felt like a spiritual journey and a spiritual practice, starting a business. I used to always say that back in the day. I don't say it so much anymore, but I've always been a slow and steady growth type of person. I've certainly had some leaps along the way, Like the year that I went from teaching 50 people in a telecourse to over 6 months. I moved, I went from 6 weeks to 3 months to 6 months. And then I finally realized I was ready for a year-long program. I had the content, the methodology had matured. The community had, and I opened up my year-long program in 2013, and we were able to have 320 people sign up for the very first year. So that was a leap. But other than that, I'm really slow and steady, And so that I have a determination. You use the word resiliency. I've definitely had my challenges. Me and my father verbally sparred a lot. He passed away a few weeks before my book came out 2 years ago, and then he was cremated the day that my book was published, and that wasn't planned. And there was a lot of love with my father, and there was a lot of challenge too. And so I had to be resilient with having him as a sparring partner, and a lot of my money stories and work and all of that was I needed to do something different than how he did things.
Yes.
Even though we're both entrepreneurs, I just really saw the way he did things, and I was like, oh, I'm very different. I need to find my own way. So there was a lot of challenge and struggle in that. And then when I started my own business, I never looked back. I never thought about getting a job, where for a lot of people, getting a job or having a part-time job is a really smart thing. And my job was my bookkeeping clients. I kept them for 2 years until I switched over completely to leading my groups, so that was my bread and butter. And that was like having a job, I was eager to let that go. But I held on to my bookkeeping clients until I really felt I was ready to, that I had a strong enough base with my small courses.
Yes. Well, that's good. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, like with the people you work with, and you talk about your money story, and a lot of it, stems from our childhood, or we want to do it differently. Do you find that's kind of a common theme with the people you work with?
Well, we all have a money story, and it's really important to spend some time to understand what that is, right? Just like we do other parts of our lives. Like, let's get curious about our money story. And it comes from everything from who raised us, parents, grandparents, to, what religion we were raised in, or spirituality, or what's our lineage, where did our grandparents come from, did they escape, and on and on. So that is part of what makes up our money story. And then we watch our parents, we watch them, or we watch, who's ever raising us, we watch them closely. And, we learn hopefully some positive things around money. We learn some not so great patterns. So I wouldn't say that we all are in reaction or response, because some people get some good money lessons being passed down, but no two people, if it's a couple, no two people earn and spend and save and give and invest in the same way. So you're learning very different things from each one. And, when we go back, I think our relationship to money is made up of a combination of our family of origin and what we learned, and what we are, sometimes we do things like they did. Sometimes we react and we rebel. Sometimes, it also depends on what's our personality type, and how did we translate what we are learning, from our family of origin. It's like how siblings are growing up with the same parents, and they all have a different relationship to money. And they're growing up in the same house, so that's when it gets more into personality, style, and all that.
Right. Well, you talked a little bit about the body check-in, and I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about it. And as a yoga teacher, I'm talking to a lot of my students about learning how to listen to your body and connecting to your breath. And I've done that from your suggestion in your book too, to really notice, like, especially when I was really struggling with my own money, and I could tell, like, when my throat would start to close up, like it would just like, and it was related to, like, not having enough money in my account, and all those things. And so I think it's a beautiful practice. Can you share a little bit about how it works?
Sure. So This is a practice that, or it's a tool that needs to be practiced. It's right. It's not like you do it one time and then you're done and you figure out all your emotions around money and then you're done, they dissolve and you're all calm every time. It's an ongoing journey. I say these practices, I'll be doing them until the day I die. And that's not a bad thing. That's just, here's a tool to take with you day in and day out and all the daily money interactions, as I mentioned before. And sometimes we remember to do a body check-in before. We're going to have the money conversation to prepare, just to check in and see what's going on. Sometimes in the middle of a money conversation, in the heat of the moment, we'll remember, oh, body check-in. I'm freaking out, or I'm getting really angry, or I'm getting really sad, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm starting to swear, fight, and I'm, whatever it is. Or sometimes we remember to do a body check-in after, as a debriefing. They're all good, right? Whenever we can remember to do one, it's wonderful. And it's really just stopping and pausing. You can take 30 seconds, you can take a full minute, you can take 5 seconds, and just stop and pause and ask yourself to listen to what's going on inside your body. And I like to do it on a few levels. So to start on the physical level, what do you notice? To let yourself notice on a sensation level, any movement, any stillness in your body. To let yourself notice what is the emotion or emotions that are present. And I'll talk more about that in a sec. And then lastly, to notice, where your breathing is in your body, how deep it is, how shallow. And usually I like to end my body check-ins by saying, what is one little adjustment that I can make that would be really helpful right now? Loosening my jaw, doing a little shoulder shimmy, uncrossing my legs, putting the soles of my feet on the floor, deepening my breath a little bit more down into my belly. So as you know, there's no right or wrong way to do a body check-in, right? But what I'm trying to help people to do is to start to stop and pause, slow down, to start to gather data, information around their money story, money beliefs, money patterns, and just how it happens in our bodies, Mm-hmm. We don't have to make up a story right away. It's really just gathering information of, my throat is starting to close. Okay. Or I'm starting to get it tightening and my shoulders are starting to head up to my shoulders are starting to head up to my ears. What's going on? Or I'm clenching my jaw. Or, so for me, the financial literacy and emotional literacy are so important that they're parallel tracks. And what I mean by that is that most of us don't know how to listen to our bodies, right? That's why a lot of us do yoga, or why I went to train to be a somatic therapist. We override so much. We ignore it. We stay in our heads. But for me, emotions have always been so strong for me. And as a teenager, I asked my parents if I could go to therapy. And they said yes, but then they sent me to a male therapist and a talk therapist because that's all they knew. Mm-hmm. And I could play a lot of games with words, and that's basically what I did, which was unfortunate, but it was a beginning. It was an entranceway. At that time, I also would go into my room, shut the door, play loud music, and dance. And I was dancing all the different emotions that would come up, finish dancing, leave the room, and then be able to articulate or understand or be with the emotions much better instead of them totally being overwhelming, Mm-hmm. I'll give one example of how this works in real life. It's one of my favorite stories because I think on some level we think one day the emotions are just going to go away, and we're not going to have any emotions anymore around money. And that's not me. That's not as humans, we're going to have emotions. Will they diminish? Will they get smaller? Do we catch them quicker? Do we now know how to work with them and name them and sit in them? And then they move much quicker once we do all that? Yes, And so this was probably 6 years ago on the weekend. We went to a coffee shop and with my little family, and there was a green car dealership next to the coffee shop. And my husband had been researching Nissan electric cars for a year or two. It was always his dream to have an electric car. And then there were these perfect, used car electric Leafs, exactly the one he wanted. Next thing I know, we're taking a test drive. Next thing I know, we're talking financing and numbers, in the car dealership. And I noticed that I'm starting to hyperventilate. Like I'm starting to get anxious. And
my throat was closing up for you. Just hearing the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My version of that, I just starting, I'm starting to, my breath shortening. It's like up in my throat. Right. And all of a sudden I was like, I caught it. And it's not like, no emotions. I caught it. And I said, honey, I'll be right back. And I went to the bathroom because the bathroom is a great place to do a body check-in. And I, did a little body check-in, noticed what was going on. Oh, I'm feeling anxious. We're about to make a mid-price point money decision. I don't want to be rushed. I like to have time. This is making me nervous. It was completely different 5 years later when we bought a house, which was so much more money. And I was so ready. And that all happened within 36 hours. But these smaller money decisions, even though a car one is pretty big, help us to learn, what to do in these big money decisions. And so I realized after I sat with my feelings for a little bit, I could calm myself down, and realize, oh, I need to have a money date with my husband right here in the car dealership. And I came out of the bathroom and said, honey, we need like a 20-30 minute money date. And what that means is let's ask some questions like, do we have enough cash flow for this? Yes. Is this in alignment with our values? An electric car? Yes. Is this going to take away from our long-term goal of buying a home? No. So we went through this series of questions, but we literally had a money date right there in the car dealership, 20 to 30 minutes. Then we made the best decision we could. We drove off the lot with the car, all very excited. And then we debriefed afterwards. And it was a great money decision, but not all are, sometimes we learn after. But that body check-in was essential for me to check in, calm down, notice what I was afraid of, ask some different questions, work with my body, and then have a money date,
I love that story. And I love that it gives us tools to avoid some of the really heated arguments that we're used to getting into around money. One of the things I've always loved that you've suggested is when you have a money date, when you schedule that time, whether it's weekly or monthly, going over budget, whatever, don't you suggest like making it kind of fun, like having dark chocolate or making it more of a date?
I'm really into everything in life, so money included. When I was creating this methodology, it had to include these other qualities that were so important to me in life. It had to be meaningful, had to be creative, had to have some playfulness in it. So I've done so many different things and added in so many different tools to help with that, right? And yeah, for me, money dates have always been like candles, get out my essential oils, nibble on really good dark chocolate, play some music. My husband can care less about that. He knows enough now. Like if we're gonna have a money date, he'll be like, "Honey, get out all your oils. Do your."
He sees you setting up candles. He knows, oh, money date time.
Candles are more for me when I'm alone, but like I get out the essential oil spritzers and I spray them.
Yes.
Or we'll go out for dinner and have a glass of wine and talk about things,
Yeah.
So I know not everyone can do wine or chocolate, but do your version of that, So that is just a teeny bit of how we've made it more playful or creative.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go. One of my life's topics was always being paralyzed by self-doubt. So I had a several-year period where I was really in that not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good at anything. And it was really when I learned my path took me to yoga and art and creativity, and those were my tools. And very similar to your path, I started teaching classes in person, started teaching online, but really focused around healing from the inside out, using creativity as a tool. But for me, it took me on a path of meeting so many women, especially, who have a similar not enough-ness story. And I love in your book, you have a whole little section about enough-ness. And one of the questions you ask in the book is you say, how can you tell if your feelings of not enoughness go deeper than just the dollars and cents? And I would love if you could talk, because one of the topics through my coaching clients, it seems that everyone, feels like they don't have enough time to do something, or they don't have enough resources, or they don't have enough money. I hear a lot of people say, I'm always behind, or I can never catch up. And I feel, that pattern of us not feeling enough definitely is related to our money story. And could you just touch on that a little bit, on how can we figure out that, yes, we need to know what's in the budget and create a budget and do some of these external tools, but how do we start really, besides the body check-in, like start to go a little deeper and start healing this not enough story?
This is a huge topic, right? I could write a whole book on it. And one of my favorite books is Lynn Twist's The Soul of Money. And it's like a Bible. I just think it's an excellent book about enoughness, right? And she talks about how we wake up in the morning and we're already like, oh, I woke up too late, or I didn't get enough sleep, or it's already not enough, right?
Yes. So
her book is beautiful on that. My contribution to this is, there's so much I want to say. Let's see. So I always like to say that, one, we're born unique, we're born worthy, we're born enough, right? And along the way, we forget that, we misplace it, we do all sorts of things with that, right? And, my personal version, well, I have so many, but one is just even being in graduate school in my 20s. And I remember it was one of our movement classes, because we were studying movement and body, and I was on the floor and I just was crying, and I could not get in touch with my value or my worth, or I thought I was wrong, which can translate to I'm not enough, I'm not okay, right? And I just remember lying on the floor, and I think, well, for me, with do you know the Enneagram at all?
I do, yes.
Okay. So that's a typical Enneagram 4. I'm an Enneagram 4 with a very strong three wing. So I, just remember that so clearly. I'd forgotten my value. I, at that time, had no idea how to create a livelihood based on my skill set, my gifts, my superpowers. I just didn't know that I would ever be able to do that, because in graduate school, being trained as a therapist, we didn't talk about money, as I said, and we weren't supposed to want money or strive for money or talk about money. We were supposed to just do our good work and somehow, be compensated. So, I know this journey personally. I like to say that our value and worth has nothing to do with the dollar signs or the numbers in our bank accounts. At the same time, we live mostly in a capitalist society, right? I know a lot of people do trade. I did a lot of trade and barter when I first started my business, the very first few years, which was wonderful, and then stopped for 10 years and then did it again. And, so I love that. But for the most part, we are providing a service or product for someone, and we're getting paid, right? And that's how we put a roof over our house, and that's how we eat, and so on. And so we do need to figure out how to charge for our services, how to come up with business models. For me, I've been on such a journey to find the best business model that integrates time, money, energy, health, family, my top, and being as generous as possible with my content, and I finally have done that years, and I've had some good ones along the way, but that's a journey that I've been on. Now, let's see, there's so much out there in the coaching world about charge what you're worth. And I hate that concept. I really do, because we could never put a number on our value or worth. We just can't, Again, at the same time, we need to figure out how to charge. And I have about 8 to 10 different questions to ask when someone's figuring out how to charge. And one of them is the body check-in, but you don't stop there, you keep going and you ask, what kind of community do you want to work with? Do you want to work with higher end folks, or do you want to work with middle class folks, or do you really want to work with lower income folks? How are you going to create a business model to do that? And what are your basic needs? Or, the third phase of my program is called Money Maps. And we do a little, what people call a budget in 3 tiers. The first tier is basic needs, bottom line. The second tier is comfortable lifestyle. The third tier is ultimate. So I have people, do a little plan, a budget for each of those tiers, and see what phase of life they're in, which tier they're at, which one they want to head towards, what phase of life. Because not every year we're growing and earning more and spending more and saving more and giving more, right? We have some of those years, but some years, like when I had my son, I needed to simplify, and I let go of my entire team and business partner and went back to one woman show, because I needed to recover after his birth. So to complete, there's so much here. But I think as far as enough-ness, and how do we feel enough-ness? How do we tap into it? How do we cultivate enough-ness when we're not feeling it, right? One of the key practices is something I'm sure you've talked about all the time, is a simple gratitude practice. And it's honoring where you are now, while at the same time you have goals for the future or for the short-term future, and how can we appreciate and celebrate where we are now and what we have now, and also these small or big goals that we have on the horizon. It's not an easy thing. It's why, I hike all the time, or I have my other practices, like I know you do too. And those also help cultivate, more calm, peace of mind, in the storm, in the ebbs and flows, in the ups and downs, because we're going to have them. And, how do we find things like going on a hike that doesn't cost anything? How can we add those things in? And I always talk about flowers and toilet paper here, because I truly, my love for them is equal. And, I'll get a bouquet of flowers and I can buy the cheaper one, and that makes me so happy. And I feel enoughness just in that little bouquet of flowers, and literally a basket of toilet paper does the same thing for me, So I know that's kind of silly, but in the larger scheme, I'm mentioning lots of things here. How do we cultivate our value and worth? There's the internal practices around learning how to say no better, knowing what your yeses are, knowing what your nos are, knowing who you are, who you're not, what you're good at, what you suck at. I spent years working on that, and I think that's the internal part of knowing our value and our worth and feeling enough. And it's a journey. It's not like one day we arrive at our enoughness and we're like, I'm enough,
Right. Yes. And I love that you keep saying that. Like that, to me, I just feel peace every time you say it. Like this is, and I say it all the time too, it's a practice. You say it's an ongoing journey. And I think that's so freeing, because I do think because of our culture and, because we don't talk a lot about money, or we feel embarrassed, and we'll talk a little bit about that too, but we just feel like we have to, get to a place and then it's somehow our life's going to be perfect. And when we realize, even with the money story, that once you've, healed a little and moved forward, then there's something else to unfold and experience. And I think that's just a really freeing statement to remind all of us, this is a practice, and to go at your own pace is okay.
It's so important, because we think that there's some kind of quick fix around this, or we think one day we're just going to arrive at this place where all our money issues are solved. We don't have any emotions around it anymore. And, everything is planned out perfectly. And that's not how life happens. Yes, we can get better and better each year. every year I'm asking who needs to be on my financial support team that I don't have now. Do I need to update my bookkeeping system? Is it time to move through a money ceiling and make more money this year? Why? What would we be using it for? Do we want to donate more this year? And so on, And I gave a keynote this year where I did say, we do all believe that someday we're just going to suddenly arrive at this place where we're not going to have any issues anymore. And even if we get better and better and we learn more and more about money every year, life is still going to throw us curveballs. And there's nothing we can do about that. We can plan so well. And I love planning and I love visioning, but, this year at the very beginning, right as I realized we were going to go over 500 students, I got a letter in the mail from the IRS that we were being audited for our personal finances, our LLC, and our C Corp, And I had been audited 17 years before, and it was a cute little audit. I was, sole proprietor, brought in 50,000, and I walked into the office with my cute little files, and the audit and meeting was over in 3 hours, and I didn't have to pay a penny more. And when these papers came 17 years later,
can I just ask? You were doing a ton of body scanning at that time, right?
So this is what, I give a 35-minute keynote on this because I'm talking about money koans, and money koans just means like, what's your money riddle? And we all have them, like a big money challenge, right? The bigger ones, and what are the steps to help you work through it? And this one it took me, I was caught off guard, and it came in my mailbox, and I felt a bit invaded. I felt a bit angry, I was going through all of my emotions, and they were big and they were strong. And it took me a good week or two. So this was longer than some other smaller money things. It really was a curveball. And it took me a week or two. I was actually not sleeping well. That's not, and I couldn't get myself to calm down, my nervous system. And finally, one day in the middle of the day, I said, you know what, I'm getting in the bath. I'm going to take a bath in the middle of the day. And I was in the water, and it finally dawned on me, you know what? I have said yes to this keynote about money koans. Guess what? I'm in the middle of one right now. And guess what? I haven't named it. And I haven't even sat down to sit with the feelings, because the flight, freeze. We're all happening at once. And usually we get one. We get fight, we get flight, we get freeze. I was having all of them. And it took me into the bathtub to name that I was in one, sit with the emotions, finally calm myself down, start asking some new questions. And I got out of the bathtub. Obviously it wasn't solved, but I had so much more trust that I had the tools, to get myself through. And then I knew that this money riddle would eventually be solved. And then I knew how to walk myself through it once I finally named it.
That's so good. There's so many things I want to go back to, but I'm going to, in the nature of time, I do want to highlight, first of all, I'm a flower. I love flowers too. Just one little small vase makes me so happy. That and the farmer's market. If I can buy like a big thing of kale and some fresh, I'm literally the happiest person alive. And so I love that, but I feel like that's such a good self-care, soul care practice, and self-care is so important. And, sometimes we get so tunnel vision. I'm thinking about the people listening right now who have like piles of debt, who are on the beginning stage of really awakening and really want to start conquering that. And sometimes we can get so tunnel visioned to that mountain ahead that it sucks the joy out of daily life. A little luxury like your favorite dark chocolate or flowers can go a long way. I think that's just a really nice way to take good care of yourself. And then something you said about saying no. Another part of your book that I'm like, yep, that's me. She's writing about me is the over-giving, under-receiving. And I think for a lot of us, especially those who have a calling that is in some heart-centered business, or they want to be giving, they're in social work or a teacher, and there is kind of this, like you said in school when you were just like, well, we're just supposed to be giving and not really ask for money. But then we're overcompensating and still filling that cycle of not enough, that internal cycle. And so one of the things you talk about first, can you just briefly talk about what that means to be like over giving and under receiving? And then how healthy boundaries, because that's something I talk a lot about with my group. Some of us just say yes to everything. How creating healthy boundaries can even help you if you find yourself as an over giver, under receiver.
Yeah, I want to answer that, but I want to make one comment on the first thing you said.
Sure.
And then we'll go to this, which was, when folks are, have a lot of debt, when they're, have to foreclose on their home, when there's a divorce, when there's a death, when, the biggies, right?
Yes.
A bouquet of flowers, a basket of toilet paper is not going to do anything, right in that moment. And so that is when, like, the steps of naming it, catching it, doing the body check-in, sitting with the feelings, drawing them, writing about them, dancing them, hiking them, is so important. And then you can, so you're trying to take the overwhelm and the fight, flight, freeze and move it to the side of you, right? But you need to name what the actual feelings are. Like with the IRS, I was feeling invaded. I was angry at the system. All this stuff is real, right? And I was having my stuff, and I had to name all of that before I could move it to the side and start taking some new steps or asking new questions of who do I need on my support team? Do I need a bookkeeper? Do I need an accountant? Do I need a financial coach? Right? Mm-hmm. So that's so important. And really, when it's a big mountain like that, we can't tackle any mountain by like just going over the whole mountain. This is obvious, but we need to take it one baby step at a time. And that's what's so important with any of these big things, or even when people are doing my year-long program. I have to say over and over and over, you have to take this one step at a time, baby steps. Everyone's in a different phase in their life. Everyone does a pacing and timing differently, right? But you have to be where you're at and decide and, let yourself see what is the one next step and take it, and then you can go from there. Right?
Yes.
And that's how you take yourself through something like that. And you need support. You definitely need people on your support team, and this is where many of us feel shame, or we feel we can't reach out for help, or we don't even know what the difference between a bookkeeper, financial coach, financial planner, accountant, so on are. That's why I had a whole chapter in my book. And I have blog articles on this, on what are the different players and what are their roles and what are their different specialties? Because I didn't know this, years ago. So maybe you need to go to my book or one of my articles just to see what are the different players and ask yourself, who do you need on your support team next?
Oh, that's so good. Do you think that's why a big part of why we experience shame around money is just that kind of embarrassment of not even knowing and what we're doing or talking about?
Yes, but why don't we know? For so many of us, we weren't given a financial education from grade school and up in small increments. We were given maybe a few pieces, a few parts. I had an accounting class in high school. I don't remember it, Or, for me, I wasn't good at math growing up. And so somehow I'd equated, if I'm not good at math, I can't do money or I can't do bookkeeping. And that's not true at all, And so I think it's really that for most of us, we are not given a financial education, not even close to a complete one, So we don't know the language of money. We don't know how to look at our numbers. We're afraid to look. And then all the emotions. We weren't taught how to work with our emotions. So that's a little bit about the money shame, right? So that's that. And then so you were asking about overgiving. Mm-hmm. And for me, that leads, and the boundaries. And for me, that leads to what I was mentioning earlier about the inner work of how do we cultivate value and worth, and how it is an ongoing journey. And one of the steps are learning how to be better with no thank you. How do we say no in a more elegant way? Or, how do we learn to say no more often? Because if you're in any of those healing professions, we are givers. We love to contribute. We love to give. We love to support people. We love to heal. We love, and so we say yes to all of that. And that's beautiful. But you can be overgiving. You can be too generous. You can give too much to family members, give too much money to family members at the expense of your own basic needs. I've seen that over and over and over. So there is a such thing. There is a thing as overgiving and being too generous, depending on what it is, And I think that healthy boundaries are just essential. They are essential. I knew about boundaries, but it took me years and years to learn. And someone recently said to me, you seem so good at boundaries. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to be 50, I've been practicing it for years and I wasn't good. And the way we learn is we overstep, we override, we don't honor our own boundaries, and then we're pissed.
Yeah, resentment sets in.
Exactly. And then we get pissed at the other person or ourselves.
Or exhaustion. I mean, so many times that as you're saying, healers that I know that are so amazing at what they do, but they have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the reasons I left the mental health field was I was working 40 hours a week. The pay was crap. I could not get any kind of self-care, massage, acupuncture, no way. I couldn't buy organic dark chocolate. That seems silly, but it did lead me to, I want to make more money. How do I do this? But boundaries are so essential. I even on my contact page on my website that leads to a collaboration page, I have such clear boundaries of no, after many, many years of giving free intakes or free tea dates or free pick my brain sessions or free, I don't do them anymore. I just don't. I have decided to be so generous with my content on my website and my blog and my podcast. Go there, enjoy it all, but you're not going to get my time, my free time, because that goes to my family, or my own self-care. So we spent a lot of time creating that contact page. And some people, every once in a while, they get upset. I get asked a lot. And will you, I just heard about your work. Can we get on the phone tomorrow? Nope. I know you locally. Can we meet for tea? And can I just ask you some questions? No. And I think the biggest way I found this was I was working on it for years. And I used to give a lot of free stuff like this for years as I was beginning my work, and it was great, and then as soon as I had my son and I was in recovery from our labor, it was so clear I couldn't do that. And I went from working 40, 50 hours a week to 10 hours a week for 2 years. And that's all I could do while I was recovering. And I learned how to be so much more efficient with my work and with my time. And so, knowing, as I was saying earlier, like, what are your yeses? Then everything else needs to be a no. It really does. If you're going to make those yeses happen, or knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, and having great referrals and choosing to be generous where you want to. It's great to have free stuff out there, but you choose, where you're going to do that. Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. I just love it because you have to say no to things you would want to do, at some point when you have your yeses, you have to say no to even the things that sound good. And I think that's sometimes hard, and learning how to discern between the two. It takes a lot of practice, for sure.
It takes a lot of practice. Years ago, when telesummits first came out, I'm talking years ago, like probably 10, I was a part of the first few ones, and then did continue to do some, but they never worked for me for many, many reasons. And the contact page is links to, as I was saying, collaboration page, and links to why I don't do telesummits, all the reasons, But so I was even trying to contort myself a bit, like, okay, I won't do a solo email, but I'll do this. And, it never felt good for me. It never felt good for them. And so finally, I just had an absolute no.
For those who are listening who are like still on the fence about that, it's like, it really does people start to respect you when you set boundaries too, and you find freedom in that. And I think that that's just something that's good to remember, that it may be hard to say no the first few times, but it does get easier, and it's so freeing.
Many people expect it, and some will get upset, and the people that are getting upset have their own boundary issues.
That's right.
And have just some entitlement that you should be there for them, but that's okay.
And it's okay to upset people, That's right.
It is.
What is your definition of mindfulness? And as we're starting to heal and kind of get to that stage where we're trying to make good money decisions, I like how you talk about making intentional, mindful choices with our money. Can you tell me a little bit about your definition of mindfulness and how it applies to our money decisions?
Yeah, I'm terrible at general definitions like that. But I'll try to explain it. When we were coming up with the subtitle of my book, so it's The Art of Money, subtitle is A Life-Changing Guide to Financial Happiness. And, all these words were thrown out there. Financial mastery, financial abundance. I used to call my work conscious bookkeeping, so conscious was being used a lot. It's hard to wrap up, a healthy relationship to money in one word, right?
Yes.
When they came up with it, when the publishing team came up with financial happiness, I was like, I like it. That works, And while there's no perfect word that wraps it all up, and then someone will say to me, well, how do you define a healthy or successful relationship to money? And I say, it's going to be different for each of us. And we all need to decide what that means to us. So what phase of life are we in? And what are our priorities and goals and values at this time? And, what are you working on? Health stuff, family stuff, so that is really important. If I'm, mindfulness though, for me is the day in and day out. It is not, as we've said, a quick fix. It's not one day it's going to all get solved and resolved. It's an ongoing journey. It's a day-to-day mindfulness, staying present, practice as much as we can, right? We're still going to check out. We're still not going to do our bookkeeping every week. We might have a week where we travel. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
How do we keep coming back in? And what is the right amount of attention to bring to this area of life? Usually at the beginning, we ignore it. We put it in a corner. We don't water the garden. It needs watering, but it doesn't need overwatering. But most of us, because we weren't given a financial education, there is a big learning curve here, and there is a lot to learn. But again, it's going to be in bite-sized baby steps, day in and day out for the rest of our lives. And that's why I teach in a year-long program. That's why I created a whole framework that once you learn, you just not repeat, but you just keep fine-tuning, and maturing more and more and more as you go.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about how becoming a mom changed you. Is there something that stands out as far as what you're teaching your son now, and any tips for those parents listening?
Yeah. So, my publisher really wanted me to write a parenting and money book next, and I said no. I said, he's 10, or at the time I was like, he's 8 or he's 9. Like we're still figuring this out,
Yes.
maybe once he's 20 and heads to college,
Right.
I know it's 18, but I'm saying 20 intentionally, when he leaves the house at 20, he even says he's not leaving,
Of course. He'll live with you forever.
Totally. So, number one, whenever I talk about parenting, or how to teach kids, I say, number one, you got to do your own money work first, because they're watching us so closely. And a lot of the times we're adults, my community is 25 to 75 years old doing money work. There's a lot of folks in their 50s and 60s doing money work for the very first time, that have adult children doing it for the very first time, or some folks have teenagers or little kids. And so number one, it's so important for us to do some of our own money work first, right? Second, couples and money. I think, as I said, no two people come together and spend and earn and save and give and invest in the same way. So I would love couples to, start to have some money dates, and don't look at the numbers first. First, I call it story time, and just sit down and each of you get 15 minutes and talk about family of origin and what you learned from, your parents or grandparents around money growing up and how that's impacted you and how you think that's playing out today. I mean, I know that's a biggie. So start small, and do some story time and just start to learn stories. And, because I know couples that 20 years in, they didn't know each other's money stories. They never talked about money, even though they know so much about each other on every other level. So that's really important. Then with, let's see, what has been the biggest thing that's changed? I mean, I didn't think I would be a parent. I didn't want to be a parent until I turned 38. And then I just changed my mind. I just woke up one day and realized my only next step was to have a child. Really, I knew he was a boy. I knew his name was Noah. That was pretty wild. I knew he was coming through.
Wow, that's amazing.
So really grateful that he did, and so, we're trying to do money differently, or learn from the strengths and challenges of each of our upbringings. I was raised middle class with a lot of generosity and a lot of unspoken conditions. And so we're trying with our son to talk about money a lot more, to talk numbers with him when it's appropriate, but my son, just a few months ago will say things like, so how much money did you make in your business?
Mm-hmm.
And, he was 9 at the time. And I had to say, well, if I'm going to tell him this number, I need to explain more, which we've tried to do, like what are our personal expenses and how much is our home and how much is school and how much is food. And instead of just like, this is how much, taken out of context, he can make up all sorts of meaning. So I've tried to have age appropriate money conversations with him since he was 2 or 3, being in the Target aisle, he wanted everything on the shelf, right? That's what, it's all desire.
Yes.
And so instead of like, what's the word? Just like putting out that flame or putting out that desire, I would say, okay, let's put everything on your wish list. And I wasn't working as much, and we'd go through the aisles and he'd put every single thing, every single Lego on the wish list,
Yeah.
And then we moved on to like, how do we make a good decision? Like when we want 2 pair of shoes, but we're going to get 1, or we want 2 pairs of shoes, but we have to pick out of 3, how do you even choose? Or how do you start, how do you start saving some money or giving, and what do we want to give to? In the last few years, we've been really working on who do we want to give to? And he started to contribute a bit more to that. So we're just trying to talk a lot more openly, but not give him information that I feel at his age it would be too much. And how do I know that? I don't know. I'm just going by my intuition. And so that's a bit, and he knows body check-ins and stuff. And, so.
I love it. Oh, I think that's great. And it's, all of what you're saying is these are amazing tools to go within. You have a really great methodology. Like, that is so helpful for us. And it's also getting in tune with what resonates with you. What is your intuition saying? Reconnecting to your inner life so that you can start making those deeper connections. Your work is so powerful, and I'm just really grateful for it. So thank you for all that you've done over the years and all that you continue to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Where can we all find your book and learn more about your year program?
So my website that my husband built me 2 years ago, which I love, it was his parting gift. We were business partners for a while, and now he's back in his own sandbox. So my website is my name, baritessler.com, and it's BARITESSLER. And there's a great blog there. You can go to my podcast. You can link to my book. It's on Amazon. It's in many, many local independent bookstores and Barnes and Noble. And we've hard copy, and now we've paperback, and I have the contract for the audiobook, and it's on deck to do. So that's next. And there's a page called The Art of Money, and you can go there, and it is incredibly thorough and detailed. And it tells you all about our year-long program And there's a little mini taste of the Art of Money program if you sign up to be a part of my community and email list. And that's easy to find too when you get on there.
Okay, thank you so much. I will share all of those links in the show notes. Bari, thanks for being such an inspiration, and thank you so much for your time today. This has been so wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon.
Thank you so much for listening today. I know you heard something today that spoke directly to you. Check out the show notes at afreespiritlife.com and look for episode 27 to see the links to the resources we talked about today and to learn more about Bari. Also, if you're listening to the show when it comes out live, I am offering an encore to my free online workshop, Live Freely, this September 7th, 2018 at 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you can't watch it at that time, but you'd like to receive the recording, just make sure you sign up. Go to afreespiritlife.com, click free workshop, and you'll find out all the details. In this workshop, we'll be covering really practical and powerful ways that you can start breaking free of overwhelm and stress so that you can live a more authentic, empowered, and intentional life. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
As I open up to a place where I feel wide awake, I wipe away the dirt and shake it off till I see a brand new page. I'm growing. It takes time to realize that we're free, and I believe it's true.